Yes, I can hear you. I just was going to do before I could disable my mic. All right, I hear you guys fine.
Good evening. I'd like to call the September 17th, 2024 City Council Study Session to order. The live stream of this meeting can be viewed at the city's YouTube channel. It can also be viewed at the longmontpublicmedia.org/watch. Or, may we have the roll call, please, Crystal?
Sure. Mayor Peck,
Present.
Councilmember Christ, present. Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring, here. Councilmember McCoy, present. Councilmember Martin,
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez,
Here.
Councilmember Yarbrough,
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Anyone wishing to speak at first call public invited to be heard will need to add his or her name to the list outside the council chambers. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at the first call public invited to be heard. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. We are now at the part where any councilors have motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items to future agendas. Anyone? I am going to bring up Marcia because I can't see her right now. Marcia, do you have your hand raised as I can't see.
No, I was just
There you go.
waving because you said you couldn't see me.
Oh, no, never mind. Yeah, the screen only holds so many views. Great, so now we are going to have public invited to be heard. We have 2 speakers tonight, and you have 3 minutes, and we need your name and address. John Coe is first.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Is that it? Mike, there we go.
It's 50-50, right?
Well, second button.
I'm going to present this. John had something to share with you guys, so I'll share it with Marcia as well.
Okay.
I'm John Coe, 1899 3rd Avenue. I also represent my company, Fourth Party Software. Right now I'm working on AI solutions. I've been around for about 20 years doing like Google models and things like that. I started work with Meta about 6 months ago. And we're basically making a filter for AI. And I know that AI is very difficult to understand, so I'll try and get through this. This is basically a character recognition. This is like the basic example of artificial intelligence. And this is nothing I presented. This is prepared. This is just basically what it's doing. It's a character set of probably about 500,000 hand-stroked characters, and they're all labeled with the character that they represent. Then they take another set that they have labeled, but they don't tell it, and they find out what percentage works in the second set. So you can see here that the numbers that are stroked here in handwriting, that there's probably a zoom in here, but there's a little number here that says 9 has a percentage here. So this 7 is saying this has a very high probability. And some of these numbers where, let's find one, where it's not quite sure. See right here, it couldn't quite get the fact that this is an 8. But in most cases, it will, by virtue of just storing around 1 million numbers, it takes this, reduces it down to a grid of 28 by 28 on-off signals, and then reduces that to the probable number that it is. This is a basic example of AI, but I think this helps people understand when they can and can't trust these AI engines, because you can get some very sophisticated answers from them. But in taking this back to this base case, I hope it can help people understand this a little bit, because I wanted to explain this because I was in the meeting with the mayor, and she said, what is AI? And I just wanted to bring it back to this first case, because I got the full information on this about 3 years ago. And there's some other stuff here. There's another webpage I was going to present, but it's a lot more three-dimensional, and it represents the dots in different, the data in different ways. But this is just like a first case of how they represent numbers. But you really can go down to some very sophisticated solutions. And in my case, it helped me understand the mathematics between the Barnsley's fractal fern. And I don't know how far I'm on time, but and there were some mathematical errors I had in my calculations, and it helped me correct these mathematical errors, and I'm still not sure how it did it. But thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Pretty interesting. Lance Whitaker.
Just got back from vacation yesterday, so not 100%. But let's give this a try. My name is Lance Whitaker. I'm 1750 Collier Street, as you all know, Longmont, Colorado. I've lived in town for 44 years. I am happy to tell you today is National Professional House Cleaning Day, National Internet Technicians Day, National Monte Cristo Day, yummy yummy, and speaking of yummy yummies for your belly, it's also National Apple Dumpling Day, and most important, National Voter Registration Day, National Constitution Day, and National Citizenship Day. And I got my citizenship pin on the back of my hat, as always. With the diminishing open space in Longmont, I am happy to report after my vacation that Orion's belt and the stars are still out in the sky. So they're still there, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for your time.
Thank you, Lance. Seeing no one else on the list, I'm going to close first call public invited to be heard. And now we're going to dive right into our study session items, which is 2025 budget presentation. I'd like to welcome Jim Golden and Teresa Malloy.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Teresa Malloy, the Assistant Chief Financial Officer, and with me this evening are several staff members, and you'll be hearing from them as we go through the presentation. So this evening, we have quite a little list of things to discuss with you, and all of these items were included as information in your council packet. I did want to call to your attention 2 items that we are going to delay the presentation on, and those are the grants and external funding sources and the sanitation fund. So Becky Doyle is out of the office at a conference this week, and so we're going to delay those 2 topics until she's with us next week. So we're going to start off with the property tax legislation with Jim, and then we'll just move through the rest of these, and you'll be hearing from several of us. Yes, thank you. We are putting the final touches on your 24 proposed budget and the 25 proposed budget and the 25 to 29 proposed CIP. Once we have that finalized, which we're hoping later this evening, we will put that out on the website, and you all, as well as the public, will be able to access that through that link that we have included in your council communication. All right, Jim.
Okay, you can move that slide up one, please. Last week I talked a little bit about the property tax situation. I don't have a lot of new information. I do want to just give you a little bit more background and update you on what we're thinking. So as I explained in the communication, the property tax ratios go back all the way to the Gallagher Amendment on how they've been split since 1982. They were maintained based on a ratio between the value of residential property and commercial property. And so that was redone every 2 years based on that ratio. And so what it really essentially did is, at that point in time, in 1982, the assessment ratio for business was at 29%, and residential ratio was at 21%. So until it was finally voted out in 2020, between 82 and 20, the residential ratio was actually reducing over time until it reached 7.15%, and that's where it was at in 2020 when Gallagher was repealed. And at 29% still was what the business assessment ratio was. So since that time, some things have taken place. I've listed up here all of the different legislation or actions that taken place since then. In 22, State Bill 22-238 was passed, and it did lower some assessment rates to a degree. Then in 23, Proposition HH was put on the ballot for last November. As you know, that failed. In November, State Bill 23B-001 also lowered the assessment rates once more. And where that lowered it to is basically 6.7% for residential and 27.9% for non-residential, which is what was used for last year's ratios for the tax year 23, as well as what's being used this year for tax year 24. So wherever we end up is really in relationship to the numbers that we've been living off of this year and next year are based on 6.7% residential and 27.9% non-residential in general. There's some differences in there. 24-233 was passed just 4 months ago in May. It added a growth limit of 5.5%, but governmental home rule entities were exempted from that, and then it reduced the assessment rate for commercial property some for future years, 25 and 26, tax year 25 and 26, and as well as an adjustment to the residential rate. And then, since then, Proposition 50 and 108 was put on the ballot for this year, for this coming November. And then earlier this month, HB 24B-1001 was passed, and that is finally, again, having a growth cap put in place and lowering assessment rates again a little bit further. It also then resulted in Proposition 50 and 108 being removed from the November ballot. So it has no impact on tax year 24. So essentially what we've been working with our preliminary valuation is probably pretty close to what we'll see in our final valuation in November, and what we'll be seeing in revenue, which, as we discussed in previous weeks, we have about $2.68 million that we're budgeting for one-time expenses in this proposed budget. Because we do not want to commit to using those for ongoing expenses because of what we'll be facing potentially, or for sure in 25 and beyond, based on the last legislation that was passed. Now, where that goes is going to be a little bit more complicated. It's going to be based on how much property tax growth there is in valuation in any one year, in any assessment year, I believe. But what'll result in 25 is either a residential ratio of either 6.25% or 6.15%. And that's in general. There's a senior discount as well that I'm not addressing here, but that was overall all other properties. That would change in 26. It would actually go up to either 6.8 or 6.7%. But it, again, based on whether there's growth over or below 5%. But then there's also a deduction of 10% of the first $700,000 in value of property, of an individual property. So that in turn would not, I can't be sure what that outcome would be. So what you need to understand is what Longmont gets from the assessor's office is pretty much bulk type data. We know how much we have in residential and how many properties. We know how much we have in commercial and how many properties. We don't know it down to the individual property amounts, which makes this hard for us to really do a estimate of the impact. I'm hoping to be able to get some assistance from the assessor's office in the meantime. It's got quite a bit of time before the next assessment cycle, and they might be able to address that and help us out with that. I will be talking to them actually in a few days, and I'm going to be bringing that up to their attention. Do want to also then point out the change in commercial based on this would go from 27.9% now to 27% in 25, and then either 25 or 26%, depending on the type of property, in 26, and then down to 25% in 27. So as you can see, the direction is obviously going to probably be going downwards in each of these years, and that's why we're recommending that we not use that $2.68 million for ongoing expenses, and hopefully we'll have a clue as we get closer to the next budget year as to what we'll be looking at, so that we'll be able to plan ahead to deal with that during the budget process next summer, at hopefully at an earlier time period than what we had to deal with this cycle. And next year, though, is a growth year, so assessment year, I should say. Any questions on that information? If not, I'm going to turn
I
it
don't
back to
see any.
Teresa.
No, I don't see any questions.
Okay.
All right, then we are going to move on to the new positions that are included in our 25 proposed budget. So there's a total of 18 new FTE. They are being added across multiple funds, as you see here in the Water Fund, Open Space, Parks and Greenway are all additional 3 to up to 3.35 FTE being added. We've got 2.5 in the Street Fund and 2.3 in the Sewer Fund, and then another 1.3 in the Storm Drainage. So as you can see, these are full-time positions, but they're split across multiple funds. So that's why you're getting the point in the other funds. Another one in the Electric and Broadband Fund, one in the Affordable Housing Fund, and then 0.25 in the Sustainability. So the addition of those 18 FTE bring the total authorized FTE for 25 to 1161.105. And then just to go through those 18 FTE with you, we have 2 volunteer project coordinator positions. These are fixed term positions that are being offset by temp wages. One of them is in the Open Space Fund, split between open space, water, and sustainability. And then the other one is a full FTE in the Open Space Fund. We are adding a natural resource technician, also offset by temp wages, and that one is open space, storm drainage, and water. And then another fixed-term position in the Open Space Fund. This is the Agricultural Resource Specialist, FTE. And then we're adding a housing compliance specialist in the Affordable Housing Fund. And the intent for that one is that it will be a shared position with the Longmont Housing Authority. And then the 3 grounds maintenance technicians that we had mentioned previously, the salary and benefit for those are being added in the Park and Greenway Fund. However, the one-time costs, as we mentioned, is being added in the general fund. And you'll see that one-time cost in the general fund when we get to that.
So, Teresa, let me go back to that one. So, when many years ago, I want to say it was probably close to 10, when we were looking at our parks, one of the things that we said we wanted to do in the parks is, as we're building it, we wanted to ensure that we could provide O&M, because at that point in time, we didn't have enough staff to maintain what we had. So obviously, we weren't anticipating some of the changes that Jim just went over. So when we moved on the 8 and 5 projects to get some of the parks built that have been on the books for some time, we were going to look in stepping in with some of the staffing. And I think as we look at 8 and 5, that's still the plan. The challenge for us in 25 is that those parks are going to come online. And so we know we needed parks maintenance positions to come on at the same time so we could start maintaining the parks properly. One of the things that we did during that time frame, and I want to say it was around 2013 because it had to do with the flood too, in terms of the Parks Maintenance Fund. And so we created the Parks Maintenance Fund. And in that, and I'll read it to you, it says the fee will be used to support maintenance operations, repair, replacement playground, sports courts, sports fields, pool facilities, buildings, shelters, pump stations, landscaping, and I'm going to key on maintenance and operations. Because of the challenges that we were having in the general fund this year, we couldn't allocate those positions with general fund dollars. So we actually utilized the Parks Maintenance Fund in order to fund those positions so that we could ensure that we're properly maintaining the parks that'll be coming online.
And then on this slide are the FTE that we are adding mainly in the utilities funds and street. So there is a 1 FTE energy technology specialist in electric and broadband, a transportation engineering assistant in the street fund, a construction inspector that is split between storm drainage, streets, water, and sewer, and then 2 public works techs in the street fund, 1 field engineer in water and sewer, a logistics supervisor in water and sewer, and then a total of 3 utility techs, 2 at the Tech 2 level, 1 at the Tech 1 level in water and sewer. So those are the 18 positions that are proposed as new FTE in our 25 budget. Any questions on those?
Councillor Christ.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a couple of comparison type questions. So I remember from the last year's budget, we were looking to add on about 34 positions. Did we add any of those in 2024? Of the 34 that we had open?
That's a good question. I would have to go back and look. I don't know off the top of my head what we added in 24.
Okay. But this year we're saying let's add 18, so
There's
about
18
half.
new FTE for 25.
Okay.
For 25.
So I do believe it was around 34 that was added, I'm remembering from the budget message. But, so I couldn't tell you how many have been filled, but they were added to the budget.
Yeah.
And so many of them may have been filled, but I don't know offhand how many.
Yeah, we can get you the number on what's been filled. But yeah, I can't tell you off the top of my head what's been filled and what hasn't been filled.
Yeah, it was more of a comparison type
Okay.
question. But we're still reducing the open positions from public safety. Is that correct?
Right, so, and when we were adding last year, we were adding positions in the general fund and the public safety fund, were a good number of those 34. So what you see here today, though, is that neither one of those funds are adding positions, other than the ones that were transferred to the general fund from the public safety fund. So those two funds, like I said, the public safety fund positions, 6 FTE are being reduced or eliminated in that 25 budget.
No, so just 6 out of the public safety?
Yes.
Okay.
And 3 more that were transferred to the general fund. They're not being eliminated, but they were taken out of the public safety fund.
Yeah, I mean, if we were just managing the public safety fund within its own budget, we would have eliminated the 9 positions.
Right.
In order not to hit the public safety positions as hard, we transferred 3 to the general fund, which was part of the budget. It added to the budget gap that we were trying to deal with.
Okay. And the positions that we added last year were into general fund, and we've been able to keep all the general fund positions.
They weren't
occurred in
all in the
24.
general fund. I can
Okay.
probably we can give you those numbers in the breakdown. But I do believe there was a good number of them that were from the general fund. Maybe half or so, like off the top of my head. But yeah, we were able to add them. We're not eliminating them in this budget process.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I see no more questions.
Okay. So incremental development revenue. So there is 820 new dwelling units permits included in the 2025 budget, the revenue for that. And per our financial policy, anything above the threshold of 200 new dwelling units is what we consider incremental development revenue and needs to be used for development-related expenses that are either one-time or ongoing with the intention of eliminating the cost for those items should we drop below that 200 threshold. Okay, so as incremental development revenue goes down, the intention was the expense that is being covered by that incremental development revenue would either have to be borne by the rest of the general fund, should that be the decision that's made, or it would be eliminated. And so there is $399,478 of incremental development revenue from those additional 620 new dwelling permits in the proposed budget. This is very, very close to what was included in our 24 budget. It's only about $400 greater than what's in our 24 budget. So we were able to cover all of the incremental development expenses with only having to reduce some temporary wages, and I'll show you that in a minute. So 352,000 of that 399 is coming from building permit revenue, and 47,000 is coming from plan review. Those are the 2 categories, sources of revenue that we consider incremental development. Okay, so this is what makes up the expense side of that $399,000 of incremental development revenue. So as you can see, it's 3 and about a half of positions, and they are in planning and the building permitting areas. So these costs represent the costs of those positions for 25. And since, as I mentioned, we only have about $400,000 of additional incremental development revenue over what we had last year, but we have position costs going up because we, are giving pay increases next year. We had to then reduce elsewhere, and the reduction was in the temp wages. So temp wages is being reduced in '25 to help offset the costs of those position increases. But bottom line, it's really only $400,000 more than what was in '24. And then we'll move
Hey,
in.
Teresa, can you go back to that? Can you go back to that slide? You can see when those positions were added, and part of the challenge during that time is we were seeing more building activity. We didn't necessarily have the revenue to support the positions. We actually had more than that in this account. And so over the last few budget years, we've been trying to, so some of the positions that I think you may have been talking about, we've been trying to move them out of IDR into the general fund budget, knowing that over time, this number is going to continue to be more challenging for us, but the work doesn't go away. Because when we talk about the work that they're having to do from the planning technicians and the inspectors, that continues when you look at the permits that we're pulling in. So we've been intentional of trying to reduce it. I will tell you, we're going to, in future budget years, still be intentional in trying to move those positions into the general fund.
Back on the last issue, there were 34 new FTE added last year. 13 and a half were in the general fund and 4 were in the public safety fund. So about half the positions were from those two funds.
Okay, so one-time expenses. So we'll start with the general fund. So in the general fund, there is over $8 million of one-time expenses. The entire list it was included in your packet as attachment J. And I mentioned the one-time associated with those 3 grounds maintenance techs. You'll find that in attachment J. It is mainly costs associated with outfitting, providing vehicles, and additional non-capital equipment for those 3 FTE. So we categorize one-time expenses really in 4 different ways. Capital, so there is over $2 million of capital. Those are things like vehicles or anything really over our capital threshold of $5,000. And then IT equipment or technologies is only almost $625,000 for '25. That is a relatively low number compared to some of the prior years. Non-capital small equipment is $143,000. And then one-time services or expenses, so things like contract services, those types of things is what falls under services or expenses, and there's $5.2 million in that category. We do have some one-time revenues, $385,000 of one-time revenue. There is just a little over $5,000 of Union Reservoir revenue that's considered one-time to offset equipment and or one-time expenses specifically for Union Reservoir. The rest of this $385,000 is the one-time use tax that I believe Jim mentioned last meeting. So the total one-time in the general fund that is covered by undesignated fund balance is $7.68 million. And then in the public safety fund, That is attachment K in your packet. So again, the same categories, $94,000 of equipment, $254,000 of IT technology-related equipment, $62,900 of small equipment and supplies, one-time services or expenses of $537,000, and then there are 2 CIP projects that are covered by one-time in the Public Safety Fund for parking lot rehab and a portion of the keyless entry project. And then all the other funds combined is a total of 7.58 million of one-time. This does not include any CIP projects. And again, we categorize it in the same 4 categories: 4.8 million of equipment, 178,000 technology improvements, 6,000 small equipment and supplies, and 2.5 million services or expenses. So if you have any questions on any of the attachments or items on any of those attachments, we do have some staff here that could help answer those questions for you.
So far, I don't see anyone in the queue,
Okay,
so you can go on.
so we are gonna move now to the DDA budget.
Okay, so I'm going to take you through some of the DDA budget, and then Kimberly McKee is going to jump in at the end there and cover some of her projects that she'll be taking us through in 2025. So start out looking at, before we get into this, I wanted to point out that we discovered today that we have under budgeted one of the funds in the DDA for what we are presenting to you tomorrow. And so we will get that into the final budget. And this presentation is covering the correct budget that was presented to the DDA board. So unfortunately, we didn't get it all into the budget that we have presented or will be presented to you in the morning. But wanted to make sure we give you the full detail here tonight. Again, there's a lot of information in my council communication. I'm not going to go through it. It's there for anyone who wants to really get into the history of some of the DDA expenses, particularly about their use of tax increment financing. But I'm just going to deal with this 25 budget. We're looking at the funds for the downtown parking fund. It's a city fund that the DDA manages for us. The General Improvement District, which is a separate entity from the DDA, but again, they do manage that. This council board, as you're aware, is the GID board. And then the DDA funds themselves, will go through some of those highlights. Again, I'm not going to take you through detail. There's no major items here. I'm going to just jump on items of significance, though. The downtown parking fund is not got anything too significant, some minor changes for 2025. These line items here just showing you some of that detail. The General Improvement District budget is showing a little bit of an increase again, nothing major there as well. What I do want to touch on here, as well as with the DDA, is their property tax. Again, they're going through the same things with their property tax that the city is with its general fund property tax. And so we are dealing with some changes from the data that we have been working with and put our budget together with, as compared to the data that we did receive from the county just a few weeks back. So our property tax for the GID is budgeted $173,565 for 2025. The assessed value estimates that we received last month are closer to 160,000.6, and I think we're going to leave it that way. It's very similar to what we saw last year between the original assessed amount and the final assessed amount. And we're more than exceeding what was received or was to be budgeted based on the final assessed value in last year. We're exceeding it by $24,000, so I really don't see a reason to drop it again here. I don't know the answer to why we're exceeding it. And, some things about property tax are like a mystery to me after all these years. And this is sometimes one of them is why would one of them come out that high without some delinquencies involved in it. But in this case, I think we're going to not worry about it. The General Improvement District should be able to cover that difference if it really does come in at $160,000 because of its fund balance. The DDA operating fund, again, not major changes in the budget itself. I'm not going to go through those. The property tax there, it's budgeted $301,000, and it's the reverse here. The assessed value last month is actually coming in higher at $319,000. We don't need to increase the amount of property tax revenue in the budget, but we need to increase the property tax revenue in the budget in order to receive that revenue. So we will be making that adjustment in the final budget over and above what is in the proposed budget.
Hey, Jim, do you want to clarify why you have to do that for the council?
Because if you don't budget property tax revenue, you can't receive it essentially under the law, right?
You can actually receive it, it's just you cannot use it. It has to be included in your original adopted budget. It cannot come back as an additional appropriation.
You can't use it in that year's budget is what you're trying to say. So actually, we may not need to budget that because we don't have the need for that, so.
So I have a question. If you budgeted at a certain amount and it comes in over that, can you only use the portion that you budgeted?
Likely, that's correct, and we don't anyhow, usually because we don't foresee it and we don't budget it, so. Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask, and when you get down to this part, why was there a decrease in O&M?
Well, I can probably check that out or Kimberly will look as well, but we can check that out and answer that question, I think. So
Okay, thanks.
it might be that we had some one-time O&M last year. It might have been some addition of computer equipment, I think I'm recalling. And so there's just a reduction in that type of line item because it's not a recurring type expense.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to skip this slide and come back to this fund and go to the Arts and Entertainment Fund here. So this budget is seeing some increases in O&M, mostly due to contract services from events and as well as some gift card fees that are increasing. It's going to receive TIF funding of $425,316. It does receive funding from TIF every year, and the TIF funding is something I'm going to address in this next discussion here. But other than that, there's no significant changes to the Arts and Entertainment Fund budget. I'm going to talk about the construction fund here now. So the construction fund is one of the places where we do utilize TIF revenues, but wanted to start explaining a little bit about the TIF revenue here in the DDA. The construction fund is funded through tax increment financing. Under TIF, the properties in the DDA can receive 50% of the property tax levied on the growth in value over the prior 30 years that goes to the DDA annually for funding of projects that support the DDA's master plan of development. That's all in the state statutes guiding DDAs. So we use that for projects out of the construction fund, as well as we also use TIF for the arts and entertainment funding that I was referring to just in the last slide. So we've budgeted TIF at $1,649,454. We did that in '24 and we budgeted that again here for 25 at the same amount. And it happens to be about the level of TIF funding that we received in 2023. So we get most of our property tax revenue by the end of July, so we have a pretty much of a good idea of what we are going to receive in a year when we're already moving into the budget process. So that's what we've been doing with TIF budgeting, is just using what we've been getting the year before. So I used the same number for 25 as I did for 24. I'm going to get into explaining that a little bit. I wanted to give the council a little heads up on what's been going on in this area. Last year, we received the preliminary AVs actually in September of last year, and that told us that the TIF for 2024 was going to go up to 2.14 million. Now, DDAs, this slide here talks about the TIF being based on 30 years of growth. A DDA under state statute is allowed to receive the TIF over time, and in its first 30 years, the TIF grows, which is the difference between the assessed value in total and how much of it is from the growth. And so that's two numbers that they keep track of and report to us year by year. After the first 30 years, the TIF under the state statute got rolled back 10 years. And so from years 31 to 40 of the DDA, that TIF started to grow back up to year 21, 22, 23, 24, till it again reached a total TIF of 30 years after last year, which was year 40. So this year, 2024, was year 41 of the TIF. And under the legislation that was passed 20 years or more ago, it said that at year 41, the 30 years starts to just move up. It still can only be 30 years, but it moves up 1 year. So your first year moves up 1 year 30 years ago, and now you're moving up to your current year, which is the 30th year. So the TIF growth changes, but it's changing by 1 year growth. So a year ago, after they gave me that estimate, I said, hey, did you remember that this is year 41? And so that you have to take into consideration the change in the base. And the assessor's office said, oh yeah, we forgot about that. We'll do that. And so in December of last year, when we did finally receive our final assessed valuations, we received a new projection of what the TIF was going to be. And that number went down to $1.5 million. And I lost my mind. So I couldn't understand why that would happen over 1 year of difference. And I started this campaign that is not over yet. So, so for the last 8 months, 8 months ago, basically, I voiced a concern and asked them to look into this. And in turn, they bounced it back to the state, where they said that's where they were getting their direction on how to handle this. And it has taken 8 months to get an answer. And I supposedly am going to hear an answer in 2 days. I don't know what that answer is going to be, but I'm hoping that the result of it is that we are going to have some growth over what we're being shown is our TIF for this year, which is again 1.5 million. And for next year, I should say, for 25. And this year, we're not even receiving 1.5 million. We've only received 1.35 million. So that's another mystery that I can't figure out about the assessment process. But so everyone still gets billed the same amount of property tax in the DDA area. It's just which entity is it going to in the TIF process. So if it's not considered part of the increment, it's going either to the DDA or the other taxing entities, in the area, and the DDA is just a small bite of that. Obviously, the school district is the largest, the county is next, the city is next. So they all did receive some of that $500 or $600 or more $1,000 of difference from what they told me that we might get in September of last year, which of course was before the legislation was passed, which also had an impact on that. But there's no way it had a $600,000 impact on that. And so we will find out, hopefully, whether or not it's going to be more than $1.5 million in 2025. And I'm also going to hear what their determination was and why it was, and I'm going to see if it makes any logical sense with the argument that I made 8 months ago that I can hardly remember what that was about. But anyway, I wanted to bring you up to speed on that. The DDA board's been aware of that. They've been asking me about the outcome every month for 8 months, and I keep telling them not yet, not yet. So, and I was very disappointed to not see that in the final value or the preliminary valuations last month. But supposedly we've been everyone's really busy and lots of vacations and lots of things like that. So all right, so that's that. I'm going to back to this debt service fund. So this is where we get the TIF. Again, we have it budgeted at $1.649 million because that's the best number I had to deal with without knowing the outcome of this whole question. The August valuation makes it $1.5 million. We are using $425,000, as I mentioned before, for arts and entertainment. We're using another almost $1.6 million to fund what we call construction fund projects, but they're not just capital projects. They're all program projects that support the DDA's plan of development. Now, that's more than what we have revenue coming in. I wanted to emphasize to you, we have over $4 million built up of TIF dollars that's come from previous years that the DDA doesn't always use as much as that comes in 1 year. They don't use it in the same year. And so we do have some major uses of it, and that's why we've got a larger amount being used this year. The projects are program projects are $687,000. We're using $98,000 to pay the DDA for project management on the programs that they'll have and project CIP projects that they'll have going next year. There's another $69,000 that under an agreement in the IGA between the city and the DDA, there's an agreement that they will use part of the TIF that they get from the city over and above the 50% required TIF. We let them use the whole 100% of our TIF. A quarter of that has to go for infrastructure replacement. So that's $69,000 in this coming year based on the last year's TIF dollar amount. And I'll ask Kimberly to step up here now, and she's going to take us through the CIP projects as well as the other projects. We have 3 CIP projects adding up to $910,000, and I'll give you this.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Kimberly McKee, Executive Director of the Downtown Development Authority. And Jim has been wonderful, by the way. We do ask him every month, but he's done a great job really trying to get to the bottom of this, so we appreciate that. A little bit about our construction fund. The first 2 are ways that we collect data and metrics in the district that have been super helpful for us in making decisions. It is the time to redesign our website, and we're also doing a complete branding audit and everything, trying to kind of get everything in line again, so we can move into the future. $150,000, we are going to put a mural all the way around the parking structure at the hotel in working with AIPP. So that will fund that, so that becomes a beautiful statement piece. Programs in our creative district, including some staff. It is time for us to try to re-up for the certified Colorado Creative District. So trying to do some things to get a certification for the next 5 years. Some of our clean and safe programming, we do budget some dollars this year. We're able to use some folks to help kind of patrol some things that were happening in our alleys and our trash enclosures and our breezeways and things like that. So it's always important to have a little extra support in that realm. Our economic vitality, we have just brought in a national retail consultant who did an intensive 4-day audit of the district, and we'll be getting her presentation at our September meeting. And so this will be money to help implement some of those suggestions, and some of those suggestions will also cross with some of these other projects we have budgeted. Our holiday tree is looking a little sad and ragged, and it's time that we grow a new one, even though it's fake. So we'll be budgeting for that for next year. Adding to our incentives, I think our incentives have been highly impactful to our downtown environment, so making sure we can continue. We may tweak some of those based on some of our retail findings to make sure that we are putting our best foot forward in incentives. We partner with the City on the Camera project, and so ongoing, and then the Spoke on Kaufman Garage, O&M and lease. So those charges are going up. So that is the basic of our construction fund. And then a large part of our expense in the CIP is we are the proud owners of 600 Main, the old gas station across the street from the pump house. It is the worst property on Main, and we're hoping to make it a nicer property on Main. So this is some dollars to help rehab that property. Right now, as you know, there's a lease on it for the Village Place construction. But next year, we'll be looking at cleaning that up, adding some metal banners and things like that in our alley, and then continuing our wayfinding. I hope you've noticed we've implemented part of that wayfinding, and we'll continue to do so. So that is it, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I have one. In your construction fund, are any dollars through LDDA going to the hotel across the street?
In the future, they will. As they pay into property tax year over year, based on their tip incentives, those will go back, but it has to be finished and earn those dollars, and then we'll pay them back until we meet our incentive amount.
So the city or LDDA are not going to own any portion of that hotel. It's totally private. And is that what I'm assuming? Hearing?
The hotel is private, correct?
Okay.
The parking structure. It's owned by the city. The parking structure.
I'm sorry, what about the parking structure? It's owned by the city?
Yeah, well, we have the parking spaces on the ground, and then we did an air lease for the parking that's above it, or there's a component of that.
Okay.
Yeah, the city GID owned the land underneath, and then they will maintain all of the parking, both ours and theirs, and they have a lease to build their deck above it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I do have an answer to the question about the positions that are filled. Joanne was looking at them. So we filled, she said we were able to fill the positions in 2024. We've since had some vacancies. So we currently have 21 recruitments ongoing, but we can't tell you whether it was those positions or not. And so, as you know, in positions, she can say we filled them, but then people start moving. And so we do have 21 positions currently in recruitment. Obviously on police, we continually have positions in recruitment because I'm not sure that we've been fully staffed in years. And so, and that's just with retirements and other changes, but it does look like we were able to fill those. At one point, we can't say that they're still filled today.
And next, I'm going to ask Christina to come up and cover these 3 topics for you.
Good evening, Mayor Peck and members of City Council. Christina Pacheco, Human Services Director for the city. And so I'm here to talk about 3 areas in our department that really address community need and align with Council's priorities: human services agency funding, mental health, and early childhood care and education. So in 2024, the total human services funding was just a little over $2.75 million. The state property tax legislation increased the bottom line by by $105,000. In 2025, there'll be a decrease of $12,330 in that 3% set aside for the Human Services budget. So we're looking at about $1.5 million that will be allocated to Human Services funding directly. These dollars fund nonprofits that assist our most vulnerable community members in achieving their individual and family's basic physical, social, economic, and emotional needs. So this grant process closed on August 26th. The Longmont Housing and Human Services Advisory Board will begin their funding hearings next Wednesday, September 25th, and they'll go through October 30th. And then staff will bring forward that board's recommendations, funding recommendations to council at one of your regular meetings in December. And next we have Mental Health Center of Excellence. So in 2024, council allocated $275,000 of marijuana tax revenue, really for us to take a collaborative approach to better support and leverage the work that we do that's dedicated to mental health. So what we learned since the city started partnering with Longmont Housing Authority in 2020 is that we really needed to support our formerly unhoused residents living in our permanent supportive housing communities with a more robust level of service, really to support them as they move from being unhoused and move towards self-sufficiency. So it's really critical to do this, especially with those individuals who have mental health challenges. And so the funds that were allocated were used to hire additional clinicians to support this population and really start to look at how we could provide high quality, community-focused mental health services and therapeutic case management. So this program is now known as Housing and Community Wellness, and the clinicians report to me directly as the Human Services Director. So two clinicians were hired in June, and we really began to build this program, create our standard operating procedures. It was something that we just started at the ground level. They then started to reach out to other mental health teams in public safety, senior services, and children, youth, and families. So in 3 months, our clinicians have met with more than 50 individuals from the 81 units at the suites. And in line with our Mental Health Center of Excellence work, our teams began to create that continuum of services because we have clinicians housed in 2 different departments, 4 different programs that really all specialize in different areas of service. So we wanted to look at how we work with individuals in crisis, how we help maintain their stability, and we move them toward wellness. In many cases, the work that we do as a team, really helps individuals remain successfully housed. Let's see, I think a good example of the work that we're doing is how the core team and our housing and community wellness team are working together. So they communicate often, and so far since the first meeting that they had together just over a month ago, they have diverted as a team, the core team coming out to the suites at least twice. In those instances, CORE didn't have to respond to the suites and individuals were supported. And what this allows us to do is really deploy the CORE team and utilize them for their intended purposes.
So when we talk about this Mental Health Center of Excellence, I think what Christine is hitting on is how are we looking at capacity building beyond just what an individual group is doing? And so when we talk about the more we're able to deal with this population with these clinicians, the less we're tapping CORE to come in, which means CORE is more available for broader community needs. And so then when you start looking at it with children, youth, and family services and senior services, we're really trying to look at this broader ecosystem of mental health and how we're being very targeted, but also managing capacity. So we're upping the capacity that we have for the community. I will also tell you, we're just dipping our toe in this, based on the issues that we have, and this is something. When I look at senior services, children, youth, and family services, and just mental health generally in our community, this is something that council is going to continue seeing in the budget, because when I look at the workload that, for example, senior services, a couple of budget years ago, I said, well, we had a 2-month wait. We hired some positions. I think it went within 30 days for a while. Now we're back at 2 months. And again, it's a tight budget year, so we're trying to bring this group together so they can build some efficiencies, but then we can be really more strategic over time in terms of where do we need to look at putting people and really having the broader community in mind, but then being tactical within where we put positions.
Right. Thanks, Harold. So next is early childhood, and with council's priority of really ensuring that families with children under 5 receive appropriate, affordable, and high-quality care and education, staff moved forward efforts and projects in these 4 areas that are listed here. The first area focuses on friend, family, neighbor care, FFN. So staff, along with collaborators, held an early education summit that just focused on those who provide care and are characterized as friend, family, neighbor providers. So from that, a dashboard with data was created that really helps us paint a picture of care in this area and how, as a city, we can support. We estimate that at least 60% of Longmont children are in FFN care, and so we know that this is essential. This is a good idea, a good representation of kind of some of the areas that we need to follow up on. We know that providers want to create connections, learn about local and statewide resources, and most importantly, develop trust with the city of Longmont so that we can more adequately support them and their connections. So we've created a plan to provide workshops around several topics, things like early literacy and language development, safety and first aid, and stress management and self-care for caregivers. So that first meeting is going to be September 30th, and that's going to be in connection with our Northern Colorado Child Care Innovation Summit. And we're going to be partnering with Early Childhood Council of Boulder County and the Colorado State Department of Early Childhood to have this summit at the Longmont Museum. So what we did was we attached just a screenshot of this dashboard, and if council wishes for a more extensive presentation on this, we'd be happy to bring that back at a later time. So the next 3 areas that we have is 529 college savings. Over the last year, this committee has gained a lot of momentum. We've increased outreach efforts by being present at key school and community events. And the St. Vrain Foundation also has a new executive director with lots of knowledge of marketing and communication efforts. So this committee really has moved things forward and gotten families signed up for college saving plans. So the next one is the Front Range scholarship funds. So we've worked with Front Range Community College to make scholarships accessible and really start to grow our own early childhood educators. We know that there is very few people that are going into this field, and that's part of the reason that we have the need in this area, and children that need to be able to get into these spots. So funds are now available that really remove barriers. They look at providing tuition and books, interpretation resources, and really technology needs. So if somebody needs a computer, then those scholarship funds are available for that. And then the final one is our early childhood hub. The city was part of an employer-based childcare grant to the state, where slots for city employees ultimately will be secured at the hub once it's built out. So there's going to be a groundbreaking celebration on October 3rd, and we're going to get started on that work. So that concludes my part. Are there any questions?
I do have one, just out of curiosity. When we started the 529 Jump College Savings a few years back, the city put in, was it $50?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. Are we still doing that?
Yes, that's part of the funds that are leveraged for this. And what the committee has done, at that time, it was available to kindergartners
Right.
who were coming in. And so through work with this program, what Jenny identified was, from CYF identified was that we really needed to expand that. And so I think that families from kindergarten to maybe third grade can start those college saving plans with that initial investment from the city. And I believe that it was $50,000 at the time, and it's maybe $25,000 a year now that we're contributing to that.
So the other thing that concerned me when a couple of years after I asked about the equity, how many are these mainly Anglo-Saxon Caucasian families who are middle income participating, because it is that lower income equity piece that I was interested in?
I think in the beginning that is the trend that we saw, and I think what the team has really done is kind of leaned into Jenny and her expertise in working with the community to make sure that opportunities were out in the community so that more people of diverse backgrounds could apply. And so that's really why they're focusing on key school events and key community events to have families sign up.
Could we at some point have a percentage,
Sure.
since we are participating? I want to make sure it's working for everybody, not just for those who could probably afford college anyway.
Sure, I can get that data.
So part of that too is anytime we get an opportunity to work with an organization, these issues come up. So for example, I was contacted by a group to work with school students.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And, my comment was, well, what do you need?
Right.
And, oh, by the way, I need you to interact with our children, youth, and family division so that they can talk about our parenting classes and all of these programs so we can get more engagement in different arenas. And so anytime opportunities present themselves, we're trying to push them into the mix so that we can really get the word out on not only this program, but everything that we're doing.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank you,
we'll look at that
Christina.
information. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, Councilman Hidalgo Faring.
Thank you, Mayor. I was actually going to respond to that because I have attended a few of the meetings for 529 Jump, and the percentage is really low. I cannot remember off the top of my head, but students, I think they're under now the benefits. It's no longer free reduced lunch, but who receive those, who sign up, it's the newer version of free reduced lunch. We were finding that there's a low percentage of participants. So the work that the school district, you all have been, and the foundation is trying to find ways to connect with those key schools, mine being one of them. So one of the things that I'm working with our principal on is actually having a table at our parent-teacher conferences.
Right. Yeah.
So we have, 100% turnout of our parent-teacher conferences. This is where to get them when they're coming through the door. And cafecitos, we have our preschool meetings so yeah, we're all like on the same page.
Yeah,
so that's kind of, suggestions that I've brought forward, that Jenny have brought forward, that, I see that the participants in the city as well as the foundation and the district we're all seeing the same
Great.
thing.
Thank you so much.
I think to that point, they wanted me to go to one of those. I'm going to go, but I'm bringing all of
Right.
them with me.
Right.
So that, if it's me talking about broader city issues, or things like that, I still have the team that really is engaging with the parents on things. And so that's kind of what we were talking about, is if we can leverage our time for other things, but we can capitalize on it, that's how we're going to make a dent. Because it's those things that I think are important to get representatives from the community to attend events.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm handing it off to Parks Maintenance next. Okay, thanks.
Do we need to take a short break? Up here, down there? How far along are we in the
How
schedule?
much more do we have?
2 more topics.
2 more topics.
Okay, we'll hang in.
Okay.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm David Bell, Director of Parks and Natural Resources, and I have, I believe, 4 slides for you, so I'll try to keep this moving fairly quickly. This is an update on kind of the projects we've been doing, some of the reasons we have had some of those budgets increase this year that Harold talked about, and I'll get to that as we go forward. But also, I think a reminder of when you are able to put resources towards good staff and really try to get things done. This first slide is really about our 8 and 5 project that Council and Harold and others saw that we had dollars sitting there that were not getting spent to get parks built in our community. And we were able to hire Stephanie Cooper and some additional staff for her. And we have been really doing a great job of keeping those projects on track and moving forward. You'll see 4 of those there. We've had some great field trips out with those with Prab and others to look at that. And again, having that staff on board to keep those going forward, we're going to be getting those done on time and moving through these projects. In addition to the projects that team's been working on, Danielle Cassidy and her team have been working on some of these regional trail alignments. And even though it's always a challenge working on our city properties, in our parks, in our communities, when you start thinking about having to work with the state floodplain, with CDOT, with CPW, with neighbors, in right-of-ways, these problems have a lot of complications. So Danielle and her team have been doing a great job trying to keep these moving along. We're making good progress, and I think that we're going to be great to see some of these regional trails really start to come together. And as we started seeing the Dry Creek even come in, we've been hearing great things from our PRAB members and stuff that have been out on that section of trail and seeing this kind of regional connectivity really come together. One of the things that I think as Council and Harold and others started talking about as we looked at doing the 8 and 5 and trying to make sure we're being responsible those dollars to sit in there to get things built in our community really was the fact that we wanted to have a commitment to the community that we take care of what we already had. So part of the positions that were hired were some temp positions to really take on those park renewal projects. And you'll see that's a pretty significant list of projects we have going on right there. And I think there's a lot of communities that look out their window right now and are able to take a look at parks that have been in their backyard for a while that need a little bit of sprucing up and a little bit of love, and they're getting that right now with the group that's out there. In this last slide, I think Harold really did a pretty good job of setting me up, and Harold, you can jump in here where you want to. But the final commitment, I think, with 8 and 5, we had, if we're going to build these parks, we have to, get the staff to do it. If we're going to build them, we can't neglect the things we have. But also, if we're going to build parks, we have to make sure that we take care of those new parks as well. Harold, I think, really did a great job of trying to figure out, in addition with Stephanie Cooper and Timber Tosti and Teresa and Sarah and Sandra. I mean, it was a huge group process. Say, how do we see these parks coming online and make sure that we can take care of those when we know we have such a hard time in the general fund? So Harold has talked about how he looked at that parks maintenance fee and been able to take those dollars and then shift some dollars around to really help the general fund, put that in balance. And then the other piece you'll see up there are some movements in the Conservation Trust Fund. That was, again, a conscious decision. Those Conservation Trust Fund dollars can be used a lot of ways in the city. But knowing we had a gap this year, Harold has looked at that and said that's the way we're going to try to deal with this year. And then as we go forward, we'll continue to look at ways we can try to make this work. The other piece I think you'll probably be hearing about is that Timber, as park superintendent, working with Stephanie, has been working on what he's calls his total park health. And that really is looking at not only how to take care of the parks we have today, but also as Stephanie's group looks at parks coming online down the road, Harold's going to know exactly how many park staff we're going to need to take care of those additional acres. So it's a little bit of a crystal ball as we look down the road, as we have parks coming along. We should have not a whole lot of surprises for council and budget as we start seeing those projects come online, that it's going to take resources to take care of those.
Specifically what David's talking about in this is when we started looking at things like the Parks Maintenance Fund, or we looked at the Conservation Trust Fund, those were really ongoing dollars. And when you look at some of these expenses, they were more one-time in nature in terms of what we were going to do. And so if you look at your one-time funding costs, there were 2 examples of funding for trails in the one-time expenses. Those were actually in the Conservation Trust Fund, which was ongoing funding. And so what we did is we funded those projects with one-time dollars to then free up the ongoing dollars. And so when you look at the fund statement on the Conservation Trust Fund, you can see where we pulled down on some of the projects, but then you can see where we're moving out some of those one-time funds and we're putting in ongoing funds. And so what that starts doing is it starts positioning, and I can't read it, the 2025 budget to have an ending working capital of 1.1 million. Obviously, when we looked at it, we were seeing that strengthen in outgoing years. To David's point, now we can start exploring what are the opportunities for potential ongoing costs or other projects in other areas where we haven't historically been able to utilize those funds. Specifically based on council direction, what's front and center in my mind is library. You all have been talking about that for a while. That was something that we talked about in this conversation. It's also then connected with the ground maintenance positions moving into the park maintenance fee. Those are things we're going to be talking to you about early next year in terms of what that's going to look like in the future. But what we really try to do is maximize the one-time funding where it was most appropriate in ongoing funding on ongoing expenses, and looking at one-time funding for one-time expenses to create some capacity in these other funds. Is that looking at Teresa?
Yeah, there's got to be a lot of heads nodding because there's a lot of people involved in that.
You haven't mentioned the goats yet.
It's interesting. I was actually at the county. We had a regional fire shed management team, and some of the communities are starting to use goats. And I got to tell them about our opportunity to use the goats, and what a great experience it was. Not only to get some weed management done in areas that's hard to do other sorts of practices, but again, I think the public's reaction to that was just great. We all talked about some of the challenges with that, but I think we had a good vendor, and it was great. And we have it in the budget for next year.
Are there any other questions or concerns? No? Thank you so much, David.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Peck, City Council members. I am Jim Angstadt. I'm the Director of Engineering Services. Tonight, wanted to provide some information on the street fund and wrap this up. 50 more slides, Harold? Yeah, okay.
Bio break.
Since Jim did that, I'm gonna, one of the things I think to also provide some context for some of the newer city council members, and it really actually has been on a couple of presentations that we've given recently and conversations with FEMA, is that I think when you look at what they're doing in the transportation fund, but honestly, I would say the water fund, the wastewater fund, the stormwater fund, it hit me last week as I was thinking about this budget. So in 2013, I think we literally presented the ongoing budget or the capital plan, and then the flood hit. And I think we came back the next week and said, scrap everything. Mm-hmm. As they've been involved in flood recovery, and we've been looking at all the projects, you know, there's been a lot of shifting within all of these funds as we were looking at match and other things. And so there are some things within the transportation fund where you're starting to see a shift, specifically pavement management program where we're putting more dollars into it. But those were things we had to shift a few years ago in order to manage some of the recovery pieces. And, you know, you're seeing one of the projects finishing now, which is the Boston Bridge, which hopefully is nearing completion. But I wanted to give some context on that, in that there's been challenges since 2013 in this budget, and I think you're seeing them now start to shift and refocus on some other things.
So transportation funding in the city is basically provided by two sources. For the Street System Maintenance Improvement Fund, which is the street fund. That funds our capital improvement program and our operating and maintenance. And then also the Transportation Community Investment Fee, TCIF. That goes to arterial streets and intersection improvements, and that is a fee that's leveled on new developments. So our Street System Maintenance Improvement Fund, Street Fund, this year, or in 2025, we're projecting total revenues of about $33 million. That is comprised of the main sources, the sales and use tax, 3/4 cent of that of sales and use tax goes into the street fund. There's some intergovernmental dollars. That is some state taxes. I believe it's gas tax, as well as that's where we embed our grant dollars that help us leverage our projects. A little over $4 million in grants are projected for next year. Then there's some license and permits and interest and miscellaneous other costs or fees that go in to support the fund. The TCIF fund for next year, we're looking at total revenues of about $778,000 made up of fees and interest. So how do you spend $33 million? In this case, we're going to have $38 million in expenses for next year, made up of personnel services, operating and maintenance costs, non-operating costs, as well as the big one, our capital costs, CIP. The revenues are $33 million, expenses $38. We're going to be taking a contribution from fund balance of a little over $5 million to make that balance out. So big chunk of that was CIP. We've briefed you on that earlier a few weeks ago. But listing the major projects again, our TRP1, which is our asphalt management maintenance program, that's a little over $9 million. We have TRP11, which is our TSM. That's where we're embedding Vision Zero for construction. In the budget message earlier tonight, I think they alluded to the amendment or attachment L. Within that, you'll see $150,000 of operating dollars that goes into support Vision Zero to finish off the action plan. So similar to this year's budget, we're budgeting about a little over $550,000 for Vision Zero to keep that moving along. And then as we fine tune that plan, we'll continue investing in Vision Zero. So for future years, you'll see that. More than likely, we'll create a separate capital improvement or capital project for that. So you'll see that directly. We have the Boston Avenue connection, still working on railroad quiet zones, missing sidewalks, First and Main Transit Station, continuing work on Kaufman Street, and then also the Main Street corridor, continuing to work on. So one of the other components of the street fund is our operating section. Large chunk, $2 million, is going to transit. We have continued to support VIA each year. The ride-free Longmont, that number has dropped a little bit to about 245 this year. We may see that in the future drop down as microtransit kicks in. We're investing $1.5 million in microtransit. And then the flex bus coordinating with out of Fort Collins, 138,000 of that is street fund, and then there's an additional 27 coming from other funds. We've also highlighted some of the key maintenance items that the city, our groups handle. Street and alley maintenance. Those are the guys who are filling potholes, kind of repairing our streets and roads, doing small scale paving projects. also repairing street signs. Then each spring we do pavement marking. So we're out doing long line striping each year, refreshing that. So that's part of our operation as well. Snow and ice removal. That's up this year. It's 1.3 million this year. So we budget for that as well. And then I also included traffic signals. We'll continue to invest in the maintenance of our signal system. Now, upgrading it, we're looking at leveraging some dollars from grants for new traffic cameras throughout the city. We're working with Harold and the team on the camera program as well. And with that, questions?
Councillor Christ.
So, Mr. Angstad, when is microtransit going live?
Phil?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the City of Longmont, with the unfortunate news for some, but it is good news overall, is that microtransit, we are just doing the kickoff meeting today. We just finally got to it with the contract signed and all the work that we had to do to get to a point with the Regional Transportation District to be okay with the way our dollars are set up. And that's planned to go online December 9th. So it's not the greatest news. Please don't kill the messenger, but we do plan on having that go on right after the Thanksgiving holiday, and then we're going to run some of those microtransit vehicles in the parade on the 14th, and they'll also provide service on the 14th as well. So it's going to be kind of a double duty. But that's my message today. Thanks.
Phil?
Yeah, before you sit down, tell us about Bustang also.
Well, that's a great point, Mayor and Councilmember Christ. One of the reasons for the delay in microtransit was because we were trying to serve the Bustang outside the Regional Transportation District. And so to get the dollars for the partnership to go into the Regional Transportation District, we couldn't include that as part of it because that's outside the Bustang only serves State Highway 119 and I-25. And so in order for us to provide that, we thought it was a critical service that our microtransit be able to get Longmont citizens to and from that location, to be able to get the Bustang to have that direct route both to Fort Collins and to Denver. And so that's where the Bustang service will be. We're going to run the microtransit out to that location. But the only way we could do that was to do a separate contract without RTD dollars for that. So that's part of the reason why we have such a delay, and the negotiations for that did take a long time. So again, my apologies, but I think it's going to be a great service once we get it up and running.
And very worth it. Thank you.
I have a question. Don't go away. Are we going? Are those vans going to be designed so they say Longmont Microtransit, or is it going to be just the company name?
No, we're going to make sure, Mayor, that those vehicles are specifically branded for
grounded.
Yeah, exactly. They should be grounded too. There's a lot of ideas for names out there. We're willing to take any names that you have, but we've got a few floating around right now. But it will not say. Unfortunately, the name of the company that we've picked is VIA Transportation Services, and that is very similar to VIA Mobility Services out of Boulder County. And so that name will be eliminated, but it'll be something like, probably not Long Monster or anything like that, like we've used to have, but something that's maybe more generic for the whole region, so we can grow this service outside of Longmont. Berthoud has shown interest, Meade has shown interest.
Firestone has.
Firestone, yeah, getting a lot of feedback. But so we want to make sure that this can grow like a St. Vrain, something in that vein, so we can be more global. Yeah.
So to be Phil talked to me about this. I think since we are first, I think the branding for Longmont needs to be incorporated in this.
Yep.
I think if you look at this screen, for example, and you look at our branding guidelines, I think how we approach it from a visual perspective and tying it into that. So Obviously, we want something broader that could be, more cities could come into play. But I do think we kind of want to put a stake in the ground in terms of being the first that's doing it. So we have a whole team dedicated that's much better at it than probably either one of us. And so this is something we're going to push to them in terms of the branding work and how we look at it. But definitely want a Longmont component on this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm telling you, the mayor's face.
So that wraps up our presentation for this evening. These are your topics for next week. We have two for you, financial policies and our priority-based budgeting. We will then need to hold our first public hearing to meet our charter requirement of having a public hearing on or before October 1st. And so these are the last two budget topics that we have for you. The meeting after next week will be a second public hearing, and then we'll be asking you all for your final direction so that we can bring back the ordinances and resolutions to adopt our budget. And so with that, I would just say if there is any questions or any additional information that you all need, we'd certainly like to hear that. Or next week, we can, we'll ask you the same question again, such that that meeting on October, I don't remember what date, the October meeting, when we will be getting final direction from you, that is when we'll need to have your final decisions.
Teresa, we also are going to have two items that we moved from this list.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct. The two items that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation will also be on next week. Yes.
Okay.
Is there anything that council wants us to bring back and talk about that we haven't? I think I mentioned this before. This is a pretty basic budget that we're presenting to you all this year, but is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want us to bring forward?
Councillor Christ.
Well, I'm still concerned about the 6 positions that we are losing in public safety. And so I'm just wondering, out of those 21 recruitments that are ongoing, are some of those maybe for public safety personnel?
Yeah, yes, because I think 3 of the positions that we absorbed within the general fund, I think those are vacant positions. So those are vacant positions that we're recruiting.
And in 2024, we're in the public safety fund. So I wondered if 3 of those were the ones that were moved over to general fund. I'm just trying to keep track here. Yeah. And I just wonder where we feel like the staffing should be, particularly in the police force. Because I know last year we felt like we were low. And so I'm concerned about losing 6.
So we're not losing all 6 in police.
I know they weren't filled, but I mean, potential.
Right. So I think what was cut in the public safety fund was 2 police positions, 2 fire positions, a communications position, and a paramedic position. So it's not all in police. Now,
Correct.
What we were concerned about and why we did move the 3 positions in police into the general fund is because we're also seeing the call volume and the workload. And so we knew that we couldn't go further into that. So that's why we absorbed them within the general fund.
Okay. I know we're talking about transportation issues too, and some of those we're going to try to address with technology. But in the end, we also have to have safety officers out there.
Yeah, so some things that they're looking at is, and I think this is going to be part of the one of the presentations that Becky's going to talk about is, so they're exploring utilizing a technology that, and this will probably be a one-time expenditure to test it completely, but it's a technology that actually generates reports off of body camera footage, and some other agencies are utilizing that software. So I'm waiting on information to come back in on that. But basically what it does at the end of the day, when you look at the amount of time that they spend on report writing, it actually reduces it enough that you actually gain volume in terms of people being on the street patrolling. So it's really utilizing technology to get at productivity improvement and counteract some of these other components that we're talking about. And JB's here, and if I missed it, JB, tell me, but I think that's the crux of what we're exploring now.
So less time doing administrative stuff and more time policing?
Yep.
Okay. That's my big concern at the end of this presentation.
Councillor Yarbrough.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question about if I know we are short of, there's a feedback. I know we are short of officers, right? And so are we able to, if we are able to get to capacity, are we able to get those officers? That's the question I have. So if we have enough officers knocking on our doors and they're amazing, are we able to hire them? And how many are we short of?
Yeah, I'm gonna let JB jump in.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you. James Brown with Public Safety. So right now we have 9 open positions, 9 open police officer positions within the department. We're always actively recruiting. We're always hiring. It's a constant evolution or a constant rotation of, with normal turnover rates with retirements and people leaving for other issues. So we run at about 95% is our average staffing level, is what we're maintaining pretty consistently among the sworn police ranks. And so to answer your question directly, yeah, we will absolutely, our goal is to be at 100% staffing. And so our goal is to try and fill all of those positions. And at different times throughout the year, we've hit that 100%. And we may be there for a week, and then we'll lose a position for whatever reason. And then one of the challenges we have is it takes so long to hire a new officer, not only to go through the hiring process and the background and go through the process of actually hiring a new officer, but then training a new officer, especially if it's an officer that we have to send to the academy, and they go through that training process, and then we bring them into our internal training process. It's about a year-long process to just get an officer trained before they're out on the street. So if we lose an officer today, we're about a year out before we're able to fill that position. So we're constantly kind of chasing those open positions.
Thank you for answering that. I just wanted to make sure that it was known that we're not trying to get officers. So we're recruiting, but it takes a year because we're just not trying to have some warm bodies at the police department.
100%.
So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that was very clear.
It's a top priority of the department, and it has been, and it'll continue to be.
Well,
Thank you.
And I would be remiss in saying, I think probably one of the biggest things that we did that probably had as significant impact as anything is the take-home car program that we've been trying to build out, because we knew we were getting information from candidates that we wanted to hire that were literally saying to us, well, when you get a take-home car program, we'll consider it. So there are a number of things that council has actually authorized us to do that has made a difference in this. I will tell you what we're talking about today in the vacant positions is what every municipality in the United States is talking about right now. And I go back to that article that I quoted on CNN. Almost every law enforcement agency is struggling right now to fill positions. And so, but definitely, it's on our mind, and their workload's on our mind, and, we'll continue evaluating.
Well, hopefully the increase in the wages will help a little bit too,
Yep.
as well as, like you said, the cars and everything. And I also understand too that most officers probably don't want to live in the city that they're arresting people in either. If you see them at Walmart and you're like, and you don't want to go to that restaurant they just served you. You don't know what you're eating, so. But
That's pretty dark.
but anyway, I'm just saying that I just wanted to make sure that it's not because we're not looking, we're not recruiting. I know we are actively recruiting, and I do thank the council for, increasing the wages for our officers, which, hopefully make recruitment a little bit better. So, thank you.
So the one thing that I haven't heard about, and I did mention it to you, Harold, was anything in this budget about the airport, any CIP maybe for infrastructure, or are we just at status quo as far as?
So there's actually a few things, or
Okay.
there's some things I want to talk about that just actually came up today, but Joni can talk generally about the airport.
Mayor Peck, members of council, Joni Marsh with the city manager's office. So actually today was the RCIP CDOT meeting with CDOT and FAA to go through the next 5-year CIP and what different grant programs we'll be accessing and what types of projects we'll be doing. So we'll be able to provide you that detailed list once we get through that process.
Great.
So you won't see that as lined out in our regular CIP because their process kind of comes after ours.
Okay.
But yeah, we do definitely have a series of projects, ways to use both our entitlements, which during COVID, we've had a little bit of a slowdown, and obviously with changes in personnel and David's passing, we had some lapse in some of our entitlement funding. We still have that funding, so we're putting it back online, going to do some projects with our 21 and 22 funding this year and next. And then we also, besides our $150,000 per year entitlement funding, we also have our bill funds that are 5 years of $195,000 of entitlements. So we're looking at what projects we'll put that towards. And the FAA and both CDOT have some other discretionary funds that we talked to them about last week as well. So I think that we're kind of getting back on track to getting some programming. And we have been doing work. We've actually been using some fund balance for some of that work and utilizing our team members in Public Works. Matt McKenzie has been a big help. So we've been able to do striping, some of our paving by using our contracts that we already have through our Public Works transportation funds and kind of piggybacking on those costs. So stuff is getting done slowly but surely, but we'll bring that back.
Great, thank you.
I think the other thing I would add is, now that we have some clarity, we had a really productive meeting with the FAA today and CDOT, and they talked to us about some other potential opportunities that we're going to start exploring. Now, obviously, the piece that we have to deal with is match, and so how we look at the fund balance within the airport fund and what we do is going to be important in terms of how we approach it. But definitely got some really good ideas today, and we have some things that we need to work on. But to Joni's point, the CDOT meeting has to happen so we can get a sense of that.
Okay, thank you for the update. Councilor Yarbrough.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for bringing that up because my daughter and my dog, we all went out to the air show on Saturday. So it was pretty cool. One of the things that is a little disappointing is that the restrooms on the airport, the field, are not accessible for handicapped or people have mobility issues. It's not at all. For people who may be sitting out there getting food at the food truck or watching planes or watching a loved one jumping from a plane, they can't use the restrooms out there at all. So, that's very challenging. So I hope that we can get some funds so where we can renovate and have a terminal, an actual small terminal that can be renovated and accessible for all. So I just wanted to mention that because I was out there. So.
Good point. Seeing no one else, I thank you very much for this incredible budget presentation. Actually, I want to say that of all the budgets that I've seen, I think the presentations this year are easier to follow and more comprehensive in the council comms. And I know we don't see all of that, but it's been done very well. So thank you very much. So we are now at mayor and council comments.
Sorry. Ooh, talkative today.
You are.
I know.
Councilor
Ooh,
Yarborough.
Chatterbox today. I just want to say that I wouldn't not be in person next week. I'll be taking my daughter to graduate school in London. So I don't know if I need to get permission. Where's Eugene? Do I need to get permission to join virtually?
I think at that meeting, we take a motion to allow you to do that.
Okay, I just
But
wanted-
if we say no, then you.
Then, hey, no problem. Adios. Au revoir. Whatever. I just didn't know if we needed to vote on it today, but that's fine.
Mayor and council, from memory, I believe the rules of procedure are in advance. But if it comes up at the meeting, you usually suspend the rules of procedure and make that motion. So doing it now, since Councilmember Yarborough brought it up, that'd be great.
I move that we allow her to.
Turn on your mic.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that we allow Councilmember Yarborough to attend virtually.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Christ, that we allow you to remote at the next council meeting virtually, to attend virtually. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. What city are you going to be in? In London? Oh, I thought you were going to.
Well, she'll be in Ascot.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It won't be in London. Yeah.
It's busy over there.
I'm envious.
No worries.
Did you say no?
He said no. He did.
You have my permission to just slap him.
I said no.
So that passes unanimously.
Point of order.
Have a safe trip. Any,
Oh, I've got one.
okay, Councilor Christ.
I just want to recognize the transportation group again for doing that extra 3 miles to get the microtransit out to the bus staying. That is going to be really instrumental for people to access the transportation they need to go north and south on I-25. So that will very much impact our transportation in the city. So thank you again.
I just want to say that the celebration at Casa de la Esperanza this weekend was, yesterday. Oh, it was yesterday. Oh my gosh. Oh, it was really, really nice. There were a lot of people there. It was really nice to see Josie Heath, who's been there forever. And so I just want to thank everybody who's always involved with that. For yes, and there was a 3rd grade child who said, "Do you know Teacher Hidalgo Ferry?" Harold. Oh. City manager comments.
No comments, Mayor, Council.
City attorney.
No comments, Mayor.
All right, it's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring. No. Or Councilor Christ, whichever one. And Marcia, and Councilor Martin. Okay, all those in favor of adjourning? Say aye. Aye. All those opposed? We are adjourned. Goodbye. Goodbye, Marcia.
Thank you.